It's here, everybody. The day has finally arrived, and it's getting interesting out there. let's go through it all, and a bunch of quarterbacks, of course, on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Here we go.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everybody. What is going on? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, and a special shout out to my hashtag everydayers. Of course, a shout out to potentially new or seldom listeners as well. I know I've got a lot. There's something going on, and I know that a bunch of you haven't been around, so I will make sure to catch y'all up on everything that is going on as well. You can find this show, though, every day, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can even watch it on YouTube. You can also watch it on Amazon Fire or Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise, then this game is for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code LOCKEDON in all caps in the game. It's here. The draft. It's tonight. We made it, folks. So, look, a lot of people are being very coy about what teams are going to do, what they think teams are going to do, mock drafts and all that stuff. But I want to have a real talk with y'all about, I guess, what I think is real and what I've been hearing. I'll get into that more, but most of the show is actually going to be a review of some of the top quarterbacks, and as many as deep into the day 2 and 3 guys that I can get, but hopefully I can get through a lot. I'm going to try not to be too verbose on some of these guys. I've done entire shows on Anthony Richardson and Levis and Hendon Hooker and even guys like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So you can also go listen to those if you're just looking for a whole bunch of stuff to cram. But before I do any of that, real talk, everybody. Your Vikings are getting a little weird. So here's what I say it all the time on this show. I'm just a podcaster. I'm not an insider. I don't have sources. Everything I know is what I hear like secondhand. But when you hear stuff secondhand through the grapevine from several different sources, it's either real or all of my friends and colleagues are conspiring to make me look stupid, which is a risk I'll just have to take. But the Vikings have tried really hard to go up to 3 with Arizona. It's wild. That is stunning. You should be stunned for a second. There were reports of this, or kind of rumors of this, that came from like somebody did a mock draft, and I think that person probably had heard this. And I did a show on it, and I was like, that was ridiculous. This was like 2 weeks ago. I was like, that's ridiculous. I mean, come on. But it would be kind of fun, but like, come on. Because that's crazy. 20 to 3. I mean, the 49ers paid 3 first-round picks to go from 12 to 3 a couple years ago. 23 to 3? That's wild. But here we are. So that's I guess the crow I have to eat is I did not think that was realistic. I am here to back off that. It is realistic. I'm not going to go into all of the details because A, I can't confirm them, and B, that's not my information to tell, but the cat's out of the bag that the Vikings are trying to go up to 3. And most of the world thinks that the Vikings are trying to go up to 3 for Anthony Richardson in particular. I haven't heard as much buzz about Levis or anything like that, and kind of league wide, it feels to me like Levis isn't exactly in the same tier as Bryce Young and Richardson. And the thing is, I have no idea where the league is on CJ Stroud. I haven't really heard anything one way or another. If teams are really worried about that S2 or that Ohio State quarterbacks don't work out or whatever. But either way, it is an open secret that the Vikings are making serious offers to go up to number 3, and they're not exactly getting a discount or anything like that. Like, it is sort of the future mortgaging move you might think. Will it happen? And this is where I need to be really, really, really careful with my words. They're trying to. It's not one of those things where it's a done deal, foregone conclusion, and they just have to, dot the I's and cross the T's. It's not some random Hail Mary nobody is taking seriously. They're in talks, they're trying to, but there's nothing stopping another team from getting that trade up instead. That doesn't have to trade up as far. There's nothing stopping the Cardinals from saying, you know what, this is all really cute. We're just going to take Tyree Wilson. There's nothing stopping the Vikings from saying, you know what, this is just too rich for our blood. We're just going to kind of sit here and maybe trade back once we're at 23 and we'll try this next year. There's all kinds of ways for it to go down where the Vikings trading up to 3 doesn't happen. But if you go with what has publicly been reported, we got Bryce Young to the Panthers is cat's out of the bag. Everybody who seems plugged in on the Texans is talking about Will Anderson there and not a quarterback, which is kind of a surprise, but Will Anderson seems to be the odds-on favorite to be the pick there. And this is all speculative too. Like some stunner can come in and throw all this out of whack. But you have Young and Anderson off the board, you have CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Jalen Carter, Tyree Wilson, all these guys. The Cardinals have their favorites of those guys. And if they could help it, they would maybe want to trade down like a little, but they don't want to lose out. They don't want to go beyond that talent cliff, which makes sense. And to do so, it requires a Godfather offer. The Vikings have put together some offers that they thought are Godfather offers, I think. But there's distance between them. Will that distance get closed when the Cardinals are on the clock? There's this pressure. I don't know. The entire world seems to be acting, and this is me kind of reading in some tea leaves. We're in Luke is speculating mode now, not Luke is telling you what people have said, but Luke is speculating mode says kind of feels like the whole world doesn't think Richardson gets past Indianapolis. Seems like Indianapolis is a place nobody expects. If Richardson's on the board at 5, I think that would surprise a lot of people in the league. The way that just the way these conversations have gone. I wish I didn't have to be so vague, but I don't want to get anybody in trouble. So I think when Arizona's on the board at 3 or on the clock at 3, I'm going to be watching that banner, that background on the stage, and I'm going to see if it changes colors. Maybe it changes purple. And then I guess what has been reported, and by the way, I'm not the only person to say this. And again, not a reporter. This is not my journalism. I'm not my investigation. If you want a real journalist who actually did this work for a living to say stuff like this, go listen to Access Vikings with Ben Gessling. He's said a lot of the same things, and he does this for a living. So if you're looking for something a little more legit, that's that. But here's what I'll say. This would be a huge swing, right? You're mortgaging a future, but you're also buying a future because Anthony Richardson would be your future. And in spite of that cost, it's kind of like, look, if he hits, the way that he would hit would be he's right up there with Allen and Mahomes, right? If he really can figure out a couple of the mechanical things that have held him back so far, if extra experience doesn't introduce new issues or whatever, and you're not going to care that you spent some extra draft capital because I got Mahomes. Like, you don't see Kansas City mourning their 2018 first round pick that they gave to the Buffalo Bills. But if he busts, it kind of, whether you cheaped out or not doesn't matter. If you do this trade for Richardson, the dynamic is that he's your quarterback from here on out, and you're not going to go into the draft next year and be like, let's get a backup plan. No, you're all in on him. That is it. So those years, whether they have first round, second round, third round picks or not, would be damaged further by Anthony Richardson being bad in that event than they would by, not having a first round rookie we could all get excited about. I don't know what compensation would be. If I did, I wouldn't say it. But if it happens, we'll be here because I'm going to be live on Locked On Vikings YouTube later today. I'm going live at 7 Central, probably closer to 6:50, 6:55 Central for the start of the draft. We'll get in there, when the Panthers are on the clock and all that, and we will be reacting. I will be reacting to the Vikings pick on that live stream. We'll be right there through the Vikings pick for Vikings on the clock and everything. If they trade out, we'll stay there for the whole round because we don't know, maybe they could trade back in or something like that. So come hang out and we'll process our emotions together. I think this would be super rad, though. I would love to see them move up. And they could be moving up for Stroud, too. I legit just don't know. But that's all of the rumor stuff I'm going to do. I want to actually talk about these quarterbacks a little bit and get you primed. If you haven't been paying attention to the whole draft cycle, that is strong of you. That shows restraint, and I am glad you had a lovely spring. Let me catch you up. Let's do a little cramming for exams here. So the rest of the show is going to be talking about top flight quarterbacks and kind of as deep into the other quarterbacks as I can get. Before I get into that, however, let me talk to you about my new favorite phone game. It is Ultimate Football GM. Look, it is almost the end of mock draft season, but if you just can't get enough of that team building thing, if you just love the roster football franchise simulator kind of game, and you want it right there in your pocket, then Ultimate Football GM is for you. You can hire the right staff. You have to draft the right players, work out their contracts. Players can actually retire and become members of your staff. You can go win 1 million Super Bowls. I've gotten some super weird screenshots of the franchises that people have put together. I saw one where somebody got every pick in an entire first round of a draft. I saw one where some people were in the year 2182 because it just doesn't end. You just keep on going and going and going and going. It's a great ton of fun. It's a breakable game if you're into that too. And I personally find that really fun. It's like, how can I put together something that the game developers did not intend me to put together? It is at ultimate-gm.com, and Locked On Vikings listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps to get a 100% free boost. So go check it out at ultimate-gm.com, or you can just search out Ultimate Football GM on the App Store. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you're looking for a more national angle during the draft too, you can check out the Locked On NFL Scouting, or that's where maybe you can tune into after I go off, because after the Vikings pick, I'll have some stuff to do. But Locked On NFL Draft Scouting's YouTube page will be live with kind of a hangout with a bunch of Locked On hosts. I might actually drop in there myself as well. So go check that out. You can also check me out at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, where I have a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about here sort of drawn out with film, if you would rather see that. The quarterbacks, the first round quarterbacks are all free. So let's talk about the QBs. A quick word on Bryce Young. I keep saying Byron. Bryce Young is probably the pick to the Panthers. Almost certainly the pick to the Panthers, the way the betting odds are and the way the reporting has been. The book on him is that he's Fran Tarkenton in the pocket. And I mean, that's a serious comp that people are actually throwing out there seriously. He's that good at, evading, resetting pockets, extending pockets, maneuvering within pockets, bailing when he has to, but he's very judicious about it. And just really slippery. He's short. And of course that comes with all the issues that, the concerns you have, but he reads the middle of the field well. He's probably the most cerebral quarterback in this whole class. Running a full field complicated offense at Alabama, noticeably more complicated than when Mac Jones was there. And I think that's why he's going 1 overall. If you're worried about anything, you're worried about his height, but he can read the middle of the field well and run around guys like that, take less hits. The thing I always point to is if you look at Lamar Jackson's injuries, and everybody talks about him as the running quarterback and he gets injured a lot, it's in the pocket. It's getting slammed and blindsided. That's where way more quarterback injuries happen than out and on the run. Because when you're on the run as a quarterback, you're protecting yourself. When you're standing in the pocket, other people are protecting for you, and those people might fail. So I'm not too worried about that, and that's kind of why he's going 1 overall. My number 1 guy, however, is actually CJ Stroud. It seems like a lot of teams might disagree with me. They might have Richardson number 1 over Stroud. That's okay. I get it. We'll get to him. But for me, CJ Stroud is not only is he, I think, the most polished and pro-ready quarterback in this draft, He's reading the full field. He's not getting baby reads. It's pro style offense at Ohio State. I think that works out. A lot of people are worried just about, well, when's the last time an Ohio State quarterback did well? And you can go stack up all the Cardale Joneses and all the bad Ohio State quarterbacks that have come out. You have to like kind of sneaky not count Joe Burrow. There's that. But I think when you play for a blue blood program like Bama or OSU, like these two guys do, you got a lot of supporting talent. You've got, probably the wide receiver one in this class, probably the wide receiver one in the next class in Marvin Harrison Jr. and Smith and Jigba. There's, always a good O-line in those places. It's just one of the top schools in the country, so it's going to have better talent than the other guys across the board, and that puts you at an advantage, and that kind of thing can trick you into thinking a mediocre play is a really good one. Hit a wide open receiver, might look really good, can even be really accurate on that, but from a clean pocket, all that stuff, you're playing on easy mode, and it looks like easy mode. Things aren't always that easy for CJ Stroud. He makes a ton of really difficult throws against good coverage. Because, look, there were some good corners in the league this year. I talked about them for an entire show yesterday, for way too long yesterday. His tape, it just melts my brain when you see the difficult throws that he makes. I mean, these are throws that would impress me for an 8-year NFL veteran. The mechanics are so polished. I could nitpick a couple of dumb little things just to do it, but I don't think that would even be productive to do. His arm, no, it's not Anthony Richardson's arm, who's got I think someone said he's got a ham cannon. I love that, ham cannon. He can, people talk about CJ Stroud not being able to create out of structure. I super disagree with that. I think there are a lot of examples of him showing the skill sets you need to create out of structure to find a check down or find a creative check down. He's not a scramble, juke and jive, turn it into a 35-yard explosive like somebody like Richardson is, like somebody like DTR is. And I think, but his improvisational ability is at least functional. That would be the least charitable way I would describe it, is functional. If not above average, it'll work for sure in bad situations. He can juke a defender. He can get outside the pocket and throw on the run. He can, keep his eyes downfield and work in a scramble drill. And I think it's just like, you put him next to Young and Richardson, who are insane in those situations, who are just like brain-melting talents, and it makes CJ Stroud look more pedestrian in that, but he's not pedestrian. He's above average, and he just very often gets compared to a couple people who are great at that particular skill, and it's like easy to mistake it for a weakness. So I think it's really easy to make mistakes with Stroud, and I think teams are making mistakes with Stroud, to be honest. As cocky as that sounds, as egotistical and overconfident as that sounds, I think teams that don't like Stroud are making a whoopsie because they've overthought it. But time will tell if I'm right or if they're right? He's my QB1. Bryce Young is my QB2. I could pretty easily be talked into switching that around, honestly. But the next guy is then Anthony Richardson, who is an alien. What if an alien played football who's not a person and is instead an alien? I mean, you've all seen the athletic scores and stuff, but for those who missed it, his athletic scores, which do have some practical biomechanical translations into the sport, into the position of quarterback in terms of generating torque, moving around in the pocket. Short area quickness is important. The 40 time and that kind of burst can be important for bailing on the pocket and also in running situations, which Anthony Richardson should find himself in more, perhaps. I think he was judicious enough about running, but considering how good he is at it, I would not. He's like one of the only quarterbacks I would be like, you know what? Yeah, drop your eyes. Go ham, buddy. You're going to go insane on guys. He is, if he came out as a defensive end, his athletic profile would have eclipsed Danielle Hunter's. I can't, you go look it up at ras.football. It's insane. I can't believe that that's the case, that this is a person that plays quarterback. He's got the ham cannon. We talked about that. The problem with Richardson is accuracy. He also ran a complicated enough to make you feel like he's got the skill set offense at Florida, surrounded by a bunch of absolutely god-awful talent. The Florida offense and the way that they were coached did not do Richardson's draft stock any favors. But what most people are worried about, I mean, Richardson is raw. He's 20. He's played like 13 games, and that rawness mostly shows up. There are definitely misreads that'll bug you, but it mostly shows up as accuracy issues. And there is a phenomenal article from Ted Wynn at The Athletic about Richardson's mechanical issues and why they lead to inaccuracies. A lot of it is lower body stuff. A lot of it comes from him trying not to wing the ball too hard, like holding back and then losing torque. And then his arm actually has to overcompensate because he didn't want to throw short balls too hard. I guess that was a thing that he was kind of trying to take zip off of his short balls because he didn't want the Florida receivers to drop it that couldn't catch a pass that was that fast. And in the NFL, that's not really an issue. These dudes can catch your really fast balls and get a bruise on their hand. That's fine. Like I remember like Brett Favre took some adjusting to when he got here. I remember that being a story. But those issues are all very fixable. Will he fix them is the question. They're not guaranteed to be fixed, but it's not the kind of thing that just is like unfixable, like if he's just got a mentality issue or a maturity issue or something, or just a straight up lack of talent. Those things are unfixable. With Richardson, it's all very fixable, and he's already doing work to fix it, and he's 20. He's got a lot of time to develop those kinds of skills. And even if he doesn't, you have this floor of a guy who can take off and just like Justin Fields it. We saw the Bears run that offense, and if that's all your offense has, obviously that's not very good, but it's the floor. That's the worst case scenario is something another NFL team is already experiencing, and I think that makes it a little bit more palatable as this is the worst things can get. Of course, outside of like he just can never stay healthy or whatever, which is, like I already described, a risk for any of these guys that you can't get. You don't get to draft the he's healthy every game guy. That's not a guy that exists. It's a physical game. Those are, I think, going to be the top 3 QBs off the board. There's also Will Levis. I'll talk to him in a bit, and he will maybe go in the first round is the way I guess I would put it. Probably will go in the first round, but I wouldn't be like stunned to see him fall to the second round. There's also Hendon Hooker. There's been a lot of talk about him, and then all these other day 3 guys. And I do think, look, the Vikings are going to try to go up and get their favorite QB, but try is not do. Just listen to Yoda. So it's also worth taking a look at some of these day 3 guys, as many as I can kind of get to here. But of course, time will be of the essence. But first, let me talk to you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. It's Built. Built has been so clutch for me lately. I've been on a bit of a kick trying to be really good and count calories and all that stuff, but the sweet cravings do not go away, it turns out, and Built has been such a clutch way to get like a little bit extra on maybe a low volume meal or even like a post-workout or something like that, like for me, if I have a low volume meal and then I'm hungry again in an hour, it's really easy for me to start snacking. But with Built, I can start snacking and I don't have to feel too bad about it because it's like 130 calories on one of those bad boys, 17 grams of protein and only like 4 grams of sugar. And they taste absolutely fantastic. And now you don't actually have to wait for delivery. You can still go to Built.com, order a box of Built. It will get delivered to your door if that's your jam. But if you're looking for something a little quicker, more direct, you can actually go to Walmart and Sam's Club and go pick up a box there as well. Once again, that is Built.com. Thank me later. Moving on with this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, another shout out to my hashtag everydayers. Sound off, you know where, and if you can. Let's go next to Will Levis, this is in order of my board, by the way. Will Levis, for me, is somebody that in the ultimate mock draft, which you can also listen to on the Locked On NFL draft feed if you're looking for a mock draft with that'll take all day, that'll take you all the way up to the draft too. That is all of us Locked On hosts represented our own teams and did a mock draft. In that mock draft, I'll spoil it right now. I won't tell you who I picked. You'll have to listen for that. But Will Levis was on the board at 23. He just fell. And I don't think that that's too ridiculous of an outcome. Wouldn't be shocked to see him go before that, but I certainly wouldn't be like, what's with this fall? I think there are teams that aren't as into him. I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings were one of them. I passed. I traded out, actually. I did not pick Will Levis, even though he fell right into my lap. A lot of people got really crazy on me about that, but that's just what I believe, that he is not the way that I have said it is I think he would have to hit his optimal outcome where all of his weaknesses go away and all of his strengths get amplified in the league to be a better prospect than Kirk Cousins. I just see so many avenues for Will Levis to not be a better player than Kirk Cousins. With Stroud and Young, I think those guys are going to be better players than Kirk Cousins pretty relatively quickly. I think they're really, really elite prospects worthy of the 1 and 2 overall pick. With Richardson, there's definitely a world where he doesn't get better than Kirk Cousins, but there's also a world where he's way off in the stratosphere and he's the guy that brings you a Super Bowl. With Levis, his flaws are very similar to Kirk Cousins in that as soon as there's pressure in the pocket, a lot of bad habits come out. He will drift and then kind of throw on the move. Like he'll drift and try to reset his launch point, but he won't actually stop. He'll just fall into the throw and then the throw becomes inaccurate. He can kind of get a bozo-y panicky thing there as well. The habits for dealing with pressure just are not that good. And we already have a guy who's got a reputation for that. But Will Levis is also has some accuracy issues for the reasons I mentioned before. He also has some lower half problems and stuff. He's tough as nails. I think that he's getting a reputation for being a little bit of a dickhead, but I see it as in a good way. Like I think the off field is. I think people should like him more than they do, but I don't know. I'm making a character judgment from afar, so who knows? I think if he did end up being the Vikings quarterback, it would be pretty easy for me to talk myself into that, to make my peace with that. But I don't want to spend a first-round pick just to get Kirk Cousins, but on a rookie contract, because I just don't think that that's good enough to win a Super Bowl. That's really where I'm at, is that there's a threshold for is that quarterback good enough to win a Super Bowl, and I think there's too many problems for him to meet it. But if you want to daydream, he has a little more athleticism than Kirk Cousins, like Kentucky ran read option, so there's actually some running that you can do there. It doesn't actually translate into a good improv gene, but the physicality is there, and he's younger, right? So of course he's going to be a little faster, and then he also has a ham cannon. There's 65-yard bombas on his tape where you're like, Jesus, that is the entire field. What an insane post route. I don't know how you defend that because the range is just so big. So, pair him with a dude that runs a 4.3 and just watch him work. But the accuracy issues and all the other stuff that needs to be taken care of, it's just a little bit too much for me. So it's a hot take. I'm not really in on Levis. And that brings me into Hendon Hooker, who I've spent a lot of time this process talking about because people kept mocking him to the Vikings. And he has been my kind of go-to examples of a couple of pitfalls that I think people fall into because he was in a very weird offense at Tennessee. I think the prevailing wisdom is that offense was not made to hide him, but rather it's just what that dude runs, what that coaching staff runs. It's just kind of the scheme that they know. But it's a half-field pre-snap read scheme, which means he's only ever reading half the field. He'll never come across, say, the front side of the play isn't there. Let me see what's on the back side of the play. To the point where guys on the back side of the play would just give up on their routes because, all right, ball's never coming. I'm saving my energy, which makes evaluating those receivers a little bit weird too. There are deeply troubling accuracy issues. If I had to start a game tomorrow and my quarterback wasn't allowed to run, I think I might I would definitely take Levis over Hooker. You could talk me into taking Richardson over Hooker just on an accuracy basis. Like, I think the issue is that bad because with Richardson, he will miss layups and easy throws all the time. With Hooker, he is missing rhythmic quick game, stuff you rehearse all day. He's one-hopping, worm burning. I'm just going to say it. We're on the draft day. There's only so much time for you to push back on me on this, so I'm just going to deal with it. My comp for Hendon Hooker is 2011 McNabb. He's old, he's hurt, and he's throwing worm burners on screens. It's ugly, man. I don't like it. And I don't think he is a first round quarterback. I don't think he's a second round quarterback, although it feels like he might become a second round quarterback. I just don't think he should be. I see him as a backup quarterback that needs some work to get to backup quality, and that puts him in the fourth for me. I think backup quarterback, but maybe is something you toss a fourth round pick at. But I actually have other people above him. I wanted to make sure I talked about him because he's a much more visible quarterback when it comes to the kind of next tier, the fifth guy on a lot of people's boards. The fifth guy on my board, though, is Jaren Hall out of BYU. He's actually my next favorite QB, and he's somebody that I would be pretty happy if the Vikings took at pick 87. They had pick 23. If you're like super out of the loop, yeah, they have 23. They don't have a second round pick because they traded it for TJ Hawkinson, which I think we would all do again. So I know people are frustrated that they don't have a lot of draft capital, but they do have TJ Hawkinson. And if they didn't have TJ Hawkinson, they'd have a pretty dire need at tight end. So one less asset, one less thing to do with your assets. I feel like that pretty much works. And then they have 87, pick 119, which I believe is from Detroit as part of the Hawkinson trade. And 158 and 211. Those are their picks right now. Not a lot of picks, but a lot of trading down could happen. I think the Vikings will pick 7, 8, maybe even 9 times when all is said and done, unless they package up the whole world to go up for a QB. Then, of course, all bets are off. But anyways, Jaren Hall is, boy, life was hard on him at BYU. He's another older prospect, but if you look at the reason that he's old, it's not that he just like played, Hendon Hooker spent 6 years in college. Jaren Hall did a mission for a year. It was a BYU Mormon thing. So he did a mission. He missed a year. He has 4 years of playing stat logging experience. Hooker has 5. And I think a 4-year starter is pretty normal. But with these older guys, you kind of still have to say, okay, I don't really expect a ton of development from you. I expect some development from Anthony Richardson, who's 20 and who's got 13 games of college starting experience. I don't necessarily expect once you're playing game 70, yeah, you've kind of learned what you're going to learn. And at this point, I think changing things is going to mean breaking down habits that have been around for a while. But with Jaren Hall, it's pretty polished. It's a difficult offense. He runs the McVay offense. That's really hard to do in college. A lot of dagger, a lot of keepers, a lot of really difficult hip torque and movements and stuff. And I thought he did a pretty good job of it. The issues are there's, of course, the age thing. There's a strength of competition thing. He spent most of his time playing against like Mountain West teams. And I do think that there are some pretty ugly interceptions that get him a reputation as being a sort of a YOLO quarterback. When I watched him, I did not find myself thinking, man, this guy's insane and reckless. But yeah, there's definitely some stuff where like, dude, you cannot throw that pick. That really bugs me. But I see him as the only other QB, I think, in this entire class after Stroud, Young, Richardson, Levis. I think all of those guys will probably start games, right? These guys are not backups. These guys will start games in the NFL. I think Jaren Hall is the only other guy in this class that I see, man, this guy could start games. There's one other quarterback way deep that I think has a super, super outside chance, but has way too many problems. Everybody else feels like backups. I'll see you guys in a matter of hours for the draft for live. So come by the Locked On Vikings YouTube channel, turn on the draft on your TV, and then put me on simultaneously. We're just going to be kind of talking about it, so I won't have the broadcast on. And we can react to whatever happens together. We're in this together. And if you don't want to watch live, that's also okay. I'll see you all tomorrow recapping the day. And as always, Skull.